Hey guys, tonight we're plunging into a year so grim, so utterly sunless that people thought the world had simply ended. You wake up in your straw mattress to a cold that feels unnatural, the kind that slides beneath your skin and coils around your ribs. You blink up at the ceiling of your modest home, or perhaps it's a rented attic in a soot-stained city. Either way, the light outside is wrong. It's not just cloudy, it's dark. The morning feels like dusk. The sun, if it rose at all, is hiding behind a sickly veil of ash and smoke. Birds don't sing. Your breath curls in the air. It's mid-spring, and you should be planting, tilling, getting your hands dirty. But the soil is stiff with frost. The trees bare, the skies leaden. And whether you're a poor farmer, a merchant's apprentice, or some unlucky wanderer, the feeling is the same: the world has shifted. Something has gone horribly sideways. You go outside expecting dew on the grass and warmth on your face. Instead, it's like standing inside a soot-lined chimney. The air stings your lungs with every breath. A neighbor across the path mumbles about God's punishment. Another spits into the dirt and curses the Royal Society. But the truth, no one knows anything. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from? What time is it where you are? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's 1816, and you, poor soul, have just woken up in what historians will later call the year without a summer. You make your way to the market square looking for food. The stands are half empty already, though it's early. There's a woman selling wormy carrots and blackened cabbage, a boy offering lumps of coarse bread flecked with soot. People are quieter than usual. Someone mutters about snow in Virginia, and you blink. That can't be right. It's May, but it is right. You overhear a traveler, half mad with worry, say he crossed the Alps and saw snow fall in June. In some villages, mothers are dressing their children in every scrap of wool they own just to keep them alive through August. You make a joke, lighthearted, nervous, about how nice it is to skip mosquito season. No one laughs. Instead, they stare past you toward the sky where the clouds don't move right. They just sort of loom. By now, you've heard whispers of a massive eruption on the other side of the world. A place called Tambora, an island far from everything you know. But how could a volcano halfway across the globe turn off the sun? Mainstream historians agree Mount Tambora erupted in April 1815 with a force so immense it launched billions of tons of ash and sulfur into the atmosphere. It was the most powerful volcanic eruption in recorded human history. Ash spread around the globe, reflecting sunlight, away, dropping temperatures by degrees. Degrees that made all the difference between survival and famine. But you here and now don't know the science. You just know the days are too cold, the nights too long, and your bones ache in ways they never used to. By June, you're used to wrapping yourself in every layer you own. You can see your breath as you pluck meager greens from your garden. You boil nettles, dandelion roots, even bark. When you dream of butter. Just butter. Thick, golden, sun-warmed on black bread. But real bread flour costs more than silver. Some bakers stretch it with sawdust, others with chalk. You eat it anyway because what else is there? Some nights you huddle by the hearth, watching the flames fight against the damp in the walls. You listen to stories from the older folk about the winter of '94 or the famine of '76, but no one remembers anything like this. You can't help but wonder if this is how the world ends, not with a bang, but with a never-ending winter. One afternoon, you go outside and notice your shadow is gone. The sun is somewhere up there, sure, but the light feels wrong. It's more like moonlight than sunshine, gray, cold, diffused. You hold up your hand and squint. Nothing. Not even a sliver of shadow on the cobbles. Just like a vampire, you joke. Still, no one laughs. You hear that in some towns, the church bells never stop ringing. People think the darkness is divine judgment. Others say the government is hiding something. Maybe it's a new kind of war weapon. A few scholars suggest something about sunspots and solar minima, but honestly, you're more concerned about your next meal. Historians still argue whether the eruption alone explains the full catastrophe. Some suggest a combination of solar activity, oceanic patterns, and human conflict played a role. But down on the muddy streets, none of that matters to you. You're cold, you're hungry, and worse, you're scared. One evening, a curious fellow from out of town joins you at the tavern fire. He smells like burnt sugar and wax, says he's a natural philosopher. You think that means scientist. He shows you a glass jar filled with thick black snow collected from a mountaintop. Volcanic soot, he says. The sun is bouncing off it like light off a mirror. You nod like you understand. But all you can think about is how your sister coughed blood this morning. How your uncle's cow stopped giving milk. How the trees aren't blooming. How the birds have vanished. And how the children don't sing anymore. You hear a new tune instead, low, mournful, and grim, a funeral song. It's hummed under breath by nearly everyone now. One of those melodies that never had a name, but everyone knows. Your town holds a public meeting. The mayor, red-faced and sweating under too many coats, swears this will pass. Just a bad season, he says. But the town priest speaks after him, face pale as bone. Perhaps this is our trial. A cleansing, a reckoning. The silence that follows is heavier than snow. You leave early stomach twisting. A girl on the roadside offers you a boiled rat tail on a stick. For a coin, you almost consider it. Sleep doesn't come easy these nights. The sky glows in strange colors, sometimes orange, sometimes green. Aurora borealis, some say. A gift from God. Others whisper about poison in the air. A merchant tells you people in China are selling their children to survive. That in parts of Ireland, whole villages are going barefoot and blind from hunger. That in New England, lakes are still frozen solid in June. One man says the Danube dried up completely. Another says fish are dying mid-swim, as if the rivers themselves are cursed. And yet amid all this, the quiet terror, the cold hunger, you go on. You pull weeds from the cracks in the street and try to eat them. You find warmth wherever you can, a shared blanket, a breath, a fading fire. You light a candle and pretend it's sunlight. You hum that nameless melody and try not to cry. The sky remains dark, and somehow you're still here. You wake to coughing your own maybe or someone else's through the paper-thin walls. The air is thick with soot again, but it's not from a chimney. It's coming from the sky. It settles on your windowsill like black flour coats your clothes. When you walk outside, turns puddles into inky soup. The smell is part wood smoke, part sulfur, part something you can't quite name, like burnt copper and old eggs. You taste it when you swallow. The town's baker has stopped baking. The ovens are too wet to light. Firewood's too precious to burn for bread. You hear rumors that in the next village over, people are eating boiled leather. In your town, someone cooked their dog. You've stopped asking if this is the worst of it. By now, you've heard more about that mountain on the other side of the world, Tambora. You didn't even know it existed until now. It's a name passed around in whispers, almost sacred in its horror. April 1815. Mount Tambora erupted in what we now measure as a VEI-7 event. That's Volcanic Explosivity Index, and 7 is near the top of the scale. It was 10 times more powerful than Krakatoa. The explosion obliterated the top third of the mountain, created a crater 7 miles wide, and killed at least 70,000 people in the immediate blast and tsunami. But Tambora's true kill count was just getting started. The ash column reached the stratosphere. That's not poetry, that's science. The sulfur dioxide it released combined with water vapor, creating a veil of aerosols that spread across the globe and dimmed sunlight like an enormous invisible parasol. The Earth's average temperature dropped by nearly 3 degrees Celsius in some places. 3 degrees doesn't sound like much until your wheat fails, your cows miscarry, and your child dies from a cold in July. But of course you don't know all this. You just know your skin never quite warms up anymore. The priest says Tambora is God's punishment for the wars of the last 20 years. The old soldier at the bar says it's Napoleon's revenge. The town midwife, who's seen enough death to be quiet about it, just knits silently with her cracked hands and watches the ash fall. You walk out into what should be a spring day and find the world covered in gray snow. It's not snow, of course. It's volcanic ash, fine and clinging. It drapes over rooftops, seeps into cisterns, burrows into food sacks. You swipe a finger through it, and it comes away black and greasy. You sniff, it smells like death. One of the blacksmiths says he'll forge a mask to keep the soot out of your lungs, but all he has left is warped metal and melted horseshoes. Instead, you tie a wet rag around your face and pray you don't cough too hard in public. People are jumpy now. The wrong sound makes folks edge away from you. Historians still argue whether the eruption's effects were intensified by pre-existing climate anomalies like the Little Ice Age or perhaps the Dalton Minimum, a period of unusually low solar activity. You don't care. You just want to feel the sun again. You remember sunlight, don't you, golden and warm, on your face, on your arms. That heat that soaked into your clothes and made you sleepy. You remember lying in a field once, years ago, eyes closed, feeling like a cat. Now you flinch from the sky like it's something alive and cruel. One afternoon, you see a group of townspeople staring up in silence. You follow their gaze. A blood-red sun, dim and low, glows like a dying ember through the haze. It doesn't rise so much as float, barely visible, more haunting than helpful. Someone mutters about the eye of hell. You don't disagree. You try to wash the ash from your clothes, but it just turns the water gray and slippery. Your hair smells like burnt feathers. Your skin feels gritty all the time, and no amount of scrubbing helps. The soap ran out weeks ago anyway. In a brief moment of grim humor, you turn to a friend and say, "At least we'll never sunburn again." They blink at you, face hollow, and you wish you hadn't said it. In Indonesia, where Tambora actually erupted, villages were buried under pyroclastic flows. Entire communities disappeared. Survivors described nights that never ended, skies filled with fire and lightning. But you're across the planet, and still you feel the mountain's breath in every cough, in every crop failure, in every bitter meal. Back in your village, the well's water starts tasting metallic. People are getting sick. Not plague sick, just slow, weak. You watch your neighbor's toddler fall asleep and not wake up. They bury him in a shared grave because the ground is too frozen for individual plots. It's May. Someone in the village says this is all a hoax, just bad weather, nothing more. Probably a trick by the French. You would argue, but you're too tired. Your jaw aches from chewing pine bark. In your dreams, Tambora rises like a god. Lava eyes smoke for a mouth. It screams, and the sound shakes your bones. You wake sweating, but your room is freezing. People stop singing. That might be the worst part. You try to think of the last time you heard music, not that dirge everyone hums now, but real music. Dancing music, flute and fiddle, laughter. Was it last year's harvest festival, or maybe a wedding? You can't remember. It's all ash and silence now. Still there are oddities, curious fragments of life that make you pause. The town astronomer. Yes, even this miserable hamlet has one swears that the night sky has never been clearer. With the skies darker and the air dry, the stars shine like shards of glass. He stands in the street with his telescope and whispers the names of constellations like prayers. And then there's the sheep. For some reason, a small herd near the old mill is doing just fine. Plump, even. Some say it's because the miller feeds them pine needles. Others say he's made a deal with the devil. Either way, he sleeps with one eye open now. You're starting to believe in superstitions you used to mock. A man claims that burying a mirror in the ground will bring the sun back. Another insists that if you burn dried crow's feet in a church, it'll reverse the weather. Someone actually tries it. The priest doesn't even stop them. And still, the ash falls, like the world's been turned into a snow globe and someone just won't stop shaking it. One night you look up and see something strange, a blue moon. Not metaphorical, literally blue, caused you'll later learn by ash particles in the atmosphere scattering light just right. It's hauntingly beautiful and terrifying. You realize then that even in the darkest times, the world doesn't lose its sense of awe. It just changes how it shows it. You sleep that night under every blanket you own next to a fire that never quite catches. You curl around your hunger like it's something precious. You listen to the wind outside howling like a beast circling the house. And far away, so far away, Mount Tambora still smolders in the dark, its ashes still drifting toward you on invisible winds. By now, you've developed an unsettling habit sniffing your bread before eating it. Not because it's fragrant, oh, far from it, but because you've learned that sometimes it smells like mold and lye. Sometimes it crunches not from crust, but from grit. Once it reeked of sulfur, but you ate it anyway. Hunger leaves no room for elegance. It's late June now, and your village is rationing. You're allowed half a loaf every 3 days if the baker has enough flour, which is rare. And what flour there is gets stretched, bulked up with bark, ground acorns, even clay. A clever merchant mixed his dough with sawdust and called it fiber-rich. Someone still bought it. Ash in your bread, ice in your gut. That's the rhythm of your days. The river's running slower. The wind has a bite that belongs in January, not summer. You squat on the frost-patched soil and try to coax anything green from the ground. The seeds won't sprout. Or they sprout and then die like they forgot how to grow. You start chewing on weeds. Boiled dandelions become a delicacy. You make tea out of birch bark and pretend it's soup. The cows are gone. Either dead or sold off. A few people still have goats, but they're stingy with milk. You know a woman who swears by her secret stew. One day you sneak a peek inside her pot and see a bird skull bobbing in greasy broth. You smile politely, say nothing. You've noticed the animals acting strange. The cats have disappeared. The dogs roam in packs. Birds don't sing anymore, they just scatter in silence or drop mid-flight like stones. You once saw a squirrel gnawing on a shoe. You weren't even surprised. The cold isn't just cold, it's inside you now. Not just your skin, but in your bones, behind your eyes, and the way your fingers move. It's the kind of cold that makes you forget what warm felt like. Still, there are no coats left to buy. You add layers, aprons, shawls, even curtains. A boy in town wears a burlap sack stitched into a tunic. He's proud of it. The strangest part is the sky. On some days it glows with bizarre colors, orange, purple, bruised green. It's not a sunrise or a sunset, just a smear of celestial bruises stretching across the horizon. The locals call it the Devil's Veil. You just call it unsettling. Historians still argue whether these colors were from volcanic aerosols or a combination of atmospheric anomalies and sunspot activity. But to you, it's just one more thing you can't explain. Like snow in July. Yes, snow in July. It starts one morning just a light flurry. You think it's ash at first, but then you feel the telltale melt on your skin. By noon, the fields are white again. Children cry. Adults don't. You trudge into town hoping for answers. Instead, you find a crowd gathered around a man holding up a dead chicken like a trophy. Witchcraft, he says. This is no weather of God. Someone throws a stone through the bakery window. The baker doesn't stop them. He's already given up. No flour, no firewood, nothing to lose. Elsewhere, people talk about traveling south, always south. But where is south, and what's waiting there? More failed harvests, more hungry mouths. You pass a tavern where someone scrawled a new sign. Open fire, no food, bring wood. It's crowded. Inside, people don't talk much. The air smells like wet wool and old potatoes. Someone plays a lute with only 2 strings left. It sounds broken. You listen anyway. Your friend Henry has lost weight. A lot of it. His belt wraps twice around his waist now. He jokes that he's fashionable. Then his stomach growls and no one laughs. Quirky fact time: in some parts of Europe, people turn to survival pancakes. Flat cakes made of lichen clay and dried moss. Yes, moss. You try to imagine the taste. Then you stop imagining and start wondering if you could make one yourself. One night someone tries to rob your home for a jar of goose fat. You don't blame them. In the scuffle, they drop a boot. You keep it. It's warmer than your current pair. There are no more seasons, just cold, cold, and different cold. You've started marking days by texture: soot thick, wet, frost, black wind. One day there's a rare golden hue in the sky. People emerge, blinking, dazed. A man takes off his shirt and lays on a patch of gravel, pretending it's a beach. It lasts 12 minutes. Then the clouds return. You're not starving, not yet. But your stomach is a traitor. It groans at night, begs in the morning, flinches at meals. You trick it with broth, with scraps, with hard bread dipped in water. It complains anyway. A scholar arrives in town with a suitcase full of bones. He calls himself a climate historian, which makes no sense to you. He gives a lecture in the chapel about sun cycles, volcanic gases, and ocean currents. People listen for a while. Then they ask the real question: when will the sun come back? He doesn't have an answer. You dream again of warmth. Not fire, not blankets, just warmth. A beam of sun on your wrist, a prickle of sweat, that rich smell of dry grass underfoot. You wake up sweating, then realize it's just the fever. You sleep more and more these days, not because you're tired, but because being awake is harder. The baker's wife hangs herself in the barn. No note. Just a loaf of untouched bread left on the table. A funeral procession passes your door. Silent. No hymns. No bells. Just footsteps in frozen mud. You step outside and look up. Still gray. Still endless. And yet you're still here. somehow. You go back inside. Boil some bark tea. Split your last biscuit in two, half for now, half for tomorrow. You hum that melody again, the nameless, mournful one that everyone knows, but no one remembers learning. And you wait for the frost to lift. The first time you see snow in July, you think your mind is playing tricks again. Maybe it's just more ash swirling in the wind like it does sometimes. But no, this is real snow. Cold white clinging to the fur on your sleeves and the ends of your lashes. You stand outside for a long moment, trying to decide whether to laugh or cry. You end up doing neither, just a single deep sigh that fogs up the air. This isn't just bad weather anymore. It's some kind of cruel joke. You've stopped pretending the crops will come in. The fields, those stubborn patches of mud and memory, have gone still. A few brave sprouts died under last week's frost, and you haven't seen a bee in months. The apple blossoms withered before blooming. The orchard smells like rot and mold instead of honey and fruit. Back in May, you were talking about a lean harvest. Now, in what should be the peak of summer, you're talking about no harvest at all. You spend your days scavenging, not just for food, but for anything vaguely useful: rags, nails, bottles, bones. You've taken to hoarding candles. Not for light, though that helps, but because the wax gives off heat, however faint. You sometimes burn them just to feel that tiny flame fighting the cold. The frost never leaves. Even when it melts underfoot, it clings to fences, to rooftops, to windows that never truly clear. When you wake in the morning, your breath has painted the inside of your home in ghostly patterns. There's something else, too. A change in the sounds. No birds, no insects, barely any voices. It's like the world has swallowed its own tongue. Every cough echoes. Every footstep sounds like an accusation. They call it the summer that froze to death. You'd laugh if it weren't such a good title. You hear tales from across the sea. America's not faring any better. Snowfall in New England rivers frozen in June. Livestock dying by the thousands. One man tells you Vermont is so cold, entire barns are cracking from the frost, like bones snapping. Another says farmers are moving to the Midwest, hoping the land there hasn't frozen over. A fool's hope, maybe, but you understand. Hope's in short supply. You meet an old woman who says she remembers winters warmer than this summer. She smiles with a mouth mostly gums and says, "That sun ain't been right since last Easter." You don't argue. You help dig a grave for a friend's father, frozen soil, pickaxes, 3 hours. You only manage 2 feet deep. They settle for that. Food theft has become as common as prayer. Some say stealing's a sin. Others say it's survival. You don't know which you agree with anymore. There's a growing crowd at the church every morning now. Not for worship necessarily, just to get warm. The priest keeps the doors open, the hearth lit. Some days he reads from scripture. Other days, he just sits in silence with everyone else. You're not even sure if he believes anymore, but he's there wrapped in every shawl he owns, shaking quietly in the pews. Fringe belief alert. Some towns begin sacrificing animals again, not out of tradition, but desperation. One village slaughters a rooster at dawn every morning, hoping it will bleed the frost away. Another sets fire to effigies of winter gods made from straw. You hear a rumor that someone offered up a child in the north. That one you choose not to believe. On a morning when the frost is thickest and the sun never really arrives, you help your neighbor knock down part of her chicken coop. Not because she has chickens, those are long gone, but because she needs firewood. You work in silence. The axe sounds loud. When you finish, she hands you a jar of something you don't recognize. You thank her smile and only open it later to find pickled radishes. You cry. Just a little. Then you eat every last one. Your clothes have become part of you. You haven't taken off your undershirt in weeks. The layers are stiff, stained, heavy. You dream sometimes of being naked in the sun. Not in a scandalous way. Just free, warm, unburdened. Historians still argue whether this was truly the coldest summer in recorded history, or whether the records exaggerate. They debate measurement errors, eyewitness accounts, and region-specific anomalies. But none of that matters to you. All you know is that this summer is the cruelest thing you've ever lived through. One afternoon, a child goes missing. You help search in the woods. The woods is generous. The trees are half dead, stripped of bark, the ground scattered with bones of things too thin to be eaten. You find the child asleep under a bush, blue-lipped and barely breathing. He lives. This time. At night, you hear wolves closer to town than ever. They howl differently now, as if they too are starving. A boy swears he saw one walking on two legs. Everyone laughs, nervously. Your hands are always shaking. Cold, yes, but also weakness. You haven't had a proper meal in, well, you've stopped counting. One night your body cramps so hard you think you might die right there in your bed. You don't. You wake up sore, dizzy, and more afraid than ever. A letter arrives from your cousin in Scotland. It's barely legible, the ink smudged and the paper brittle. He writes that entire families are fleeing their homes. The land is useless. Sheep frozen in fields still standing. You imagine them silent statues in the snow. Even the air has changed. You cough more now. Everyone does. A thick hacking sound that echoes across streets and through doors. You hear a merchant claim it's the air that's poisoned, that the sun is dying, that God has turned his face away. Maybe he's right. Still, some find humor in the cracks. A tailor makes a fur-lined bonnet he calls the Sun Chaser. It sells out in an hour. A street performer paints his entire body white and pretends to be a snowman just to make people laugh. Someone throws him a potato. He cries. You walk to the ridge above town sometimes just to stare out at the frozen horizon. It should be green and golden, buzzing with bees and birdsong. Instead, it looks like winter paused the world and forgot to press play. Still beneath the frost, there are signs of life. A patch of moss, a stubborn beetroot, a daisy blooming in a chimney crack. They don't fix anything, but they're there. And so are you. You in your threadbare coat. You with ash on your sleeves and fire in your breath. You not thriving, but surviving. Because this summer may have frozen to death, but you haven't. You hear shouting in the square before the church bell even rings. Not angry shouting, excited shouting, which is rarer than a ripe tomato these days. You drop the bundle of kindling you've been carrying and rush down the lane with the others, boots slapping against the frozen dirt. When you arrive, there's a crowd gathered around a cart. The kind with creaky wooden wheels and a cloth top patched with old flour sacks. A man stands in the back holding a tiny paper booklet in one hand and a half-burned candle in the other. "I bring truth," he cries. "Truth, protection, and answers." You raise an eyebrow. So does everyone else. But you stay. Why not? Hope is more addictive than food. The man throws pamphlets into the air like confetti. You catch one. The Weather Witch's Root of the Cold Curse. Oh boy. The idea spreads faster than infection. Witches, curses, sorcery. It all makes so much sense when you're starving. People are desperate for a villain, someone you can see, touch, punish. A volcano on the other side of the world doesn't scratch that itch. But a strange woman with a black cat and no husband, that'll do. Soon people are pointing fingers. First at old midwives, then at healers, then anyone who talks to birds. You see a man get chased down for brewing herbal tea. Another has his windows shattered because he sells beeswax candles with strange symbols. They're just flowers, but no one's in the mood for nuance. In a nearby village, someone ties a woman to a chair and douses her with ice water to see if she's resistant to cold. She isn't. She dies. They call it an accident. You can feel the fear growing heavier in the air. It's not just hunger now, it's suspicion, paranoia. Everyone looking over their shoulder, waiting to be blamed. People start hanging garlic over their doorframes, not for vampires, oddly enough, but for weather spirits. It's not clear what the garlic is supposed to do, but no one wants to be the house without it. You hang some too, just in case. Historians still argue whether these witch panics were genuinely widespread in 1816 or just regional flare-ups amplified by local trauma. But where you are, they feel real, too real. You walk with your head down and try not to be noticed. And yet, it's not all fear and hysteria. Some folk embrace the madness like a carnival. You see someone wearing a mask carved from a turnip, leading a procession through the village to ward off frost demons. Behind him, 3 children dressed in rags dyed with charcoal chant nonsense rhymes. A neighbor shakes a tambourine filled with pebbles. Is it theater? Is it religion? No one knows. It feels like a dream, a fever dream dipped in snow. More and more you're hearing talk of omens. A chicken lays a blood-specked egg. Someone sees a calf born with 2 heads. A comet is spotted in the sky, or maybe it was just a torch flare in the fog. Doesn't matter. People see signs everywhere. Quirky tidbit time: in one village, a rumor circulates that smearing pig fat on your door will make the sun return. Pig fat becomes a high-demand item. Someone tries to fake it with lard mixed with soot. No one's fooled. He's run out of town with a sack over his head and "liar" written on his coat. You hear about a small town upriver where they celebrated the snow, held a summer-winter festival. They built snowmen, roasted dried apples, and danced around a bonfire. 3 days later, their food stores were raided by a desperate mob from a neighboring hamlet. That's how fast joy turns into tragedy these days. The frost isn't just killing crops, it's killing trust. You stop talking to your neighbors. You avoid eye contact in the market. Every conversation feels loaded. Every silence feels louder. Everyone's tired and fear makes them cruel. One night you hear screaming. You and a few others rush toward it, though slower than you might have months ago. No one runs anymore unless it's absolutely necessary. A man is being dragged from his home by a group of villagers. Someone screams, "Weather thief." You don't know what that means, no one does. But they beat him anyway. You leave before you see how it ends. The next morning, the frost is heavier than ever. Of course, not everyone believes in witches or curses. The town schoolmaster, Mr. Keene, insists it's all atmospheric. Scientific, he says. Volcanic aerosols and solar dimming. You've heard him lecture twice. His breath fogs up his spectacles and no one listens. Superstition, he mutters one night over boiled turnips, is just a way to make sense of a world that doesn't. You nod. Then you ask for a second helping. He hesitates, then gives you one. You find yourself wondering if belief, even irrational belief, might be useful. If the idea that something controls this gods, witches, frost demons, might be more comforting than the idea that no one does. You think of Tambora, that distant volcano whose name you didn't even know before. You imagine it like a monster asleep beneath the sea, waking only to yawn fire and ash into the sky. You wonder if it's still smoking. You wonder if it remembers you. That night, you dream of a house on fire, but the flames are cold. They lick the walls in blue tongues. When you wake, your toes are numb. The morning brings no sunlight, but something almost like it. A pale golden smear across the horizon. You and half the town step out to stare at it. No one says a word. You all just stand there, breathing clouds into the air, squinting like blind mice at a candle. Then just as quickly, the clouds swallow it whole. Gone again. You don't cry. Not because you're strong, but because there are no tears left in your body. Instead, you head back inside, stir your bark soup, and listen to the silence outside. No birds, no carts, no singing. Just the creak of your bones, the wheeze in your lungs, and that endless hush of falling ash. But beneath it all, deeper than the frost and the fear, you feel it. A dull, stubborn ember. Not hope exactly, but something like it. You're still alive, and apparently so are the witches. The riot begins over barley. It's not even good barley, moldy, misshapen, and gray around the edges like it's been mourning its own existence. But it's food, and that's reason enough. The merchant cart carrying the sack pulls into the village square like a ship into a storm, and you can feel it before it happens, that collective breath. The hush, then the surge. You're on the edge of the crowd at first, a safe distance. But when the shouting starts, your feet don't move. Maybe it's shock. Maybe it's something colder, deeper. Hunger doesn't just gnaw at your stomach anymore. It pulls at your spine, your fingers, your patience. It's not hunger. It's desperation. The cart is overturned in seconds. The sack is torn open. Barley scatters across the mud like gold dust, and people dive for it with bare hands and cracked nails. You see a man elbow a child. A woman slaps someone with a shoe. Someone bites, literally bites. The sounds aren't human anymore. You reach forward just for a handful, and a boot slams down near your wrist. You look up. The constable. Wide stance, red face, musket shaking in his arms. Back off, he bellows. No one listens. He fires into the air. It does nothing. Second shot hits someone in the crowd. You don't see who, just the shape collapsing. A scream goes up, and that's when everything breaks. You back away fast, nearly slipping in the mud. People are running now, not away, but into the chaos. Grabbing, shoving, dragging sacks, climbing onto the cart like it's a fortress. A second musket fires, then a third. You don't wait to find out who they hit. Later, you find barley in your pockets. You don't remember picking it up. The village is never quite the same after that. That was the moment historians agree when the food riots began to outpace the famine. All across Europe, from northern France to Switzerland to parts of Germany, villagers began storming bakeries, grain carts, even farms. Government grain depots were raided, storehouses emptied, and by midsummer 1816, local militias were scrambling to maintain control. In many towns, they simply gave up. You start noticing the guards in your village more often now. Young men with old guns and newer reasons to use them. The mayor who you forgot existed suddenly reappears to give speeches about order and dignity. He wears 3 cloaks and stands behind a barrel fire as he talks. Hardship reveals character, he says, hands outstretched like a priest. Someone throws a potato peel at him. He flinches. You're beginning to understand something ugly, but true hungry men make dangerous crowds, but well-fed men with power are worse. Your friend Rika tries to organize a ration committee. So everyone gets something, she says, drawing little columns in soot on a slate board. People nod. They like Rika. She's fair, thoughtful, clever. 2 days later, she's found beaten in the alley behind the bakery. She doesn't die, but her cheekbone is shattered. She never speaks above a whisper again. Still, there are sparks of organization. A few brave folk try to form a meal share ring. If one person catches a rabbit, all 5 eat. If someone finds eggs, they boil them for the group. It's not generosity, it's strategy. Starving alone is easier. Surviving takes math. Then there are the priests. Some, like the one in your town, offer solace, warmth, and soup when they can. But others, they turn their pulpits into pulp fiction. End-time sermons fill pews across Europe. The frost, the ash, the snow, the hunger, it all sounds suspiciously biblical. Revelations makes the rounds again. Locusts might have been easier to handle. In a nearby town, a preacher demands all unmarried women be sent away to break the curse. Another claims music is to blame and orders all instruments burned. You hear about this from a traveler missing 3 fingers he used to play fiddle. Superstition rises with the frost. The dead are blamed for poisoning wells. One village strings garlic across every threshold. Another holds a candlelit exorcism in the middle of the road, chanting and waving chickens. It snows during the ritual. They declare it proof that Satan walks among them. You're starting to believe the madness is catching. There's a wordless understanding now. People don't look each other in the eye. Eye contact feels dangerous. Everyone is either a threat, a thief, or a reminder of who might die next. Or worse, who you might have to bury. Historians still debate the real death toll of the 1816 famine riots. Was it dozens? Hundreds more official records were often sanitized. And in small villages like yours, there are no records at all. Just the memory of boots in the mud and blood on the barley. You remember the smell, smoke, sweat, and that horrible sour tang of panic. One odd night, you sit around a barrel fire with a small group, some you know, some you don't. Someone passes around a chunk of boiled turnip, and it's the closest thing to a feast you've had in days. Someone else tells a joke about Napoleon, how he's secretly alive and hiding in the Alps, waiting to invade with an army of snowmen. Everyone laughs, not because it's funny, but because it feels good to remember laughter. A man named Casper, cheeks hollow as skulls, starts telling a story about a bear he once saw wrestle a man in Hungary. It sounds fake. No one cares. It's warm. Not the fire, but this moment. This brief flickering thing. Warmth like a ghost. You start going to these gatherings more often. They're not official. No one plans them. People just show up, share a bit, talk, pretend they're not freezing. It's not much, but it's something. One night, Casper doesn't come. Neither does his wife. The next morning, someone finds their home abandoned. The door open. No footprints in the snow. Just gone. The fire circles get smaller. In your dreams, you see the riot again. But this time, the barley is glowing golden, steaming with heat. People kneel around it in reverence. You reach out and it turns to ash in your hands. You wake with your mouth dry and your stomach clenched. You chew a stick to keep from retching. It doesn't help. By late August, the frost comes back stronger. That's what no one expected. A second wave. Like winter left the party and then turned around at the door because it forgot its hat. You start to hear whispers about the great dying. No one says it out loud, but you see it written in soot on the wall of an alley. You see it scratched into a tree trunk. The Great Dying, 1816. You don't know who wrote it. Maybe it was you in your sleep, but you nod to it every time you pass. Because if this isn't the great dying, then what is you can't remember the last time someone mentioned Napoleon without spitting afterward. He's been dead to the world for over a year now, defeated, exiled, and locked away on some rock in the Atlantic. But people still talk like he's hiding behind every hardship. Lost a child to fever, Napoleon. No flour at the mill, Napoleon. Toothache, definitely Napoleon. And yet, in a strange, twisted way, you kind of miss him. Not the man, maybe, but the era, when the world felt sharper. When people had jobs, ironworks, tailoring supply chains, roads to repair. When the armies marched, everyone ate. War had its horrors, but peace in 1816 is turning out to be deadlier. The war economy is gone and nothing has replaced it. Troops are home, borders are secure, but so are the storehouses. Empty, quiet, and watched by men with muskets who don't know what to do now that there's no one left to shoot. The emperor's shadow still looms. Posters of his downfall are pasted on half the village walls, already peeling in the wet. People still wear cockades in protest, hoping for his ghost to walk back through the fog and fix everything. You're not much for politics, but even you see the irony. You survived the war. Now peace is trying to kill you. The ex-soldiers in town don't have land to return to. Their farms were sold, their families gone, or they've just forgotten how to live without orders. You see one of them, Jakub, standing outside the bakery every morning, like he's guarding a ghost. He hasn't spoken in weeks. Someone says he still hears cannon fire when the wind is strong enough. One morning he salutes a snowdrift and then walks straight into the river. They don't find his body for 3 days. This is what peace looks like when the land itself stops cooperating. With no war machine grinding up crops for supply, there's no reason to plant in bulk. And even if there was, the ground's too cold, the seeds too fragile, and the workers too sick to care. You help try to dig a trench for planting and end up coughing for 2 days straight. Your hands don't blister anymore, they just crack. Historians sometimes call this the peace famine, a rare, cruel moment when the end of violence led directly to the end of food. The infrastructure that war built, the roads, the contracts, the labor collapsed the moment the muskets stopped firing. And without it, villages like yours just float helpless through the ash. Meanwhile, the aristocrats are still eating. You hear rumors, always whispered, always unconfirmed, of grand houses where tables still groan under the weight of meat and wine and sugared fruit. Carriages still run in the city. Men still argue about property rights while chewing roast duck. You wonder if they even know what's happening out here in the villages. Someone says they saw a nobleman eat a whole orange. An orange. In this weather, in this world, it sounds like a fairy tale. Ration lines stretch longer than ever. You don't even stand in them anymore unless you know someone's got something worth waiting for. Most times you just scan the crowd to see who's looking thinner, who's not there at all. You start bartering again. You trade an old iron kettle for a wool scarf, a tin spoon for a handful of grain. Someone offers you half a biscuit for your boots. You think about it for a long time. The soldiers who came back from war are restless now. Some of them gather at the edge of the square, whispering about taking what's owed. Others roam from village to village, offering protection in exchange for food and shelter. One group rolls in with drums and banners, calls themselves the Ash Guard. You don't know whether to laugh or lock your door. You overhear one of them say, "At least war had a point." You get what he means. There's talk of rebellion. Not organized, not ideological. Just hunger wrapped in anger. You pass a barn covered in chalk marks, a loaf, an axe, a coin with a slash through it. Some kind of code. You don't ask what it means. You don't want to know. A fringe preacher arrives in town one evening standing on a crate and declaring that Napoleon was the Antichrist and the cold is God's mop cleaning up after him. No one throws anything. That might count as food. Later, someone sets fire to his cart. No one confesses. The ashes scatter like everything else, and still the sky stays gray. No rain, no thaw, just cold and silence. The roads are turning to sludge again, frozen by dawn, slushy by noon, cracked and crusted by evening. You pass a coach stuck in the mud. The horses look worse than the driver. Your village elder, one of the last left from before the war, starts carving bones into dice. He says they help him predict the weather. Everyone knows he's lost it. But you still ask him to roll them for you. Next week, he says, squinting at the ivory. A death, then a little sun, then nothing again. He's not wrong. There's a funeral 3 days later. Then briefly, a strange brightness breaks through the clouds. Sunlight. Real, golden, honest-to-goodness sunlight. People weep. Literally weep. Someone throws off their coat and lays on the ground. You feel it on your skin just for a moment, and it's like you've been kissed by memory. Then by dusk, it's gone again. The frost returns. People begin using the phrase, the hunger war. It fits. There are sides. There are battles. There are victories and losses. The only thing missing is uniforms. Unless you count patched cloaks and soot-covered scarves. One boy begins painting red stars on his boots. Not for any political reason, just because it makes him feel brave. He shares his heel of bread with you one day and says, "If we had a general, maybe this war'd be over already." He's 11. You carve your name into a piece of driftwood and toss it into the river. You don't know why. Maybe so that some stranger far downstream might know you were here, that you fought this war, that you lived through a year when nothing made sense and the world stopped growing. You sit by the fire and whisper the names of the months to yourself like a prayer. April, May, June, July. And now August is ending and still there's no harvest. Just you, the cold, and the memory of a hero long gone. Napoleon may be dead, but his absence, that's still killing people. You expected America to be different. Not better exactly, but different. Maybe warmer, maybe more hopeful. The kind of place where you'd step off the boat and immediately smell bread baking, or hear cheerful fiddle music drifting from a barn dance. Instead, you arrive in New York and step into what smells like wet rope, old smoke, and anxiety. The harbor is a mess, boats piled up like driftwood docks, crumbling sailors shouting through the fog like they're trying to scare the sky away. A man with one tooth offers to sell you a boiled egg for 2 coins. You laugh. He doesn't. You walk away hungry. At first it seems like you just traded one frozen nightmare for a slightly louder, wetter one. But soon you realize America's in just as much trouble. New York City, August 1816. Instead of sunshine and bustling markets, you find shivering crowds huddling by brick walls still dripping from last night's rain. You hear the same whispers as back home. What happened to the sun? Will winter ever end? How many more can we bury? The summer is misbehaving here too. In upstate New York, snow fell just weeks ago. Rivers iced over. Farms failed. You hear of towns where entire corn crops curled up like dead spiders. One man says his chickens laid frozen eggs. Quirky Tidbit, a Massachusetts farmer, claimed his apple trees cried in the night sap, freezing, cracking the bark with soft groans like wooden sobs. You'd have dismissed that as poetic nonsense a year ago. Now you don't rule out anything. The frost follows you even here. At least New York has fire. You smell it before you see it, charred wood tar smoke, the metallic bite of panic. Entire blocks are blackened wrecks still smoking from the latest blaze. Firefighters, mostly volunteers with buckets and desperation, shuffle past you, coughing into kerchiefs. No one asks how it started. These days, it always starts. The newspapers blame chimneys or faulty lamps or thieves looking to cover their tracks. But in the streets, people whisper another word: revenge. They burned it down for the insurance, someone mutters behind you in line for water. Better a payout than a failed harvest. You don't comment, but you glance at the nearest shop front, charred to bone and still smoldering, and wonder if maybe fire is the only thing that can still feel warm. You see a family living inside a burned-out stable. The roof's gone, but they've propped up canvas between beams. The children play in the ash like it's sand. Their laughter sounds thin, forced, but real. Even here, across an ocean, the stories are the same. In Vermont, people are packing up wagons and heading west, hoping to outrun the frost. There's even a name for them now, the year without a summer refugees. One couple offers to take you with them, but you hesitate. You've already run so far, and the idea of chasing another mirage, exhausting. Besides, they say Ohio's getting frosts now too. Historians still argue whether the northeastern US suffered more than Europe. On paper, maybe not. But here on the ground, the sense of betrayal that this land of promise and new beginnings has fallen under the same dark spell cuts deep. You end up working in a small tavern down near the Battery. Not for money, just food. A plate of boiled cabbage and barley porridge per shift. You serve men with frostbitten fingers and women with teeth missing from scurvy. Everyone talks fast here, even when they're tired. It keeps their jaws warm. One night, a regular named Eli tells you about the 4th of July celebration that got snowed out. We tried to light fireworks, he says, voice hoarse, but they just fizzled in the wet. So we lit candles instead. Sat around, sang songs, ate pickled onions and hardtack. He pauses, eyes distant. We said we were free, but we sure didn't feel it. The tavern keeps a fire going at all hours now. Wood is scarce, but the owner claims heat brings in more customers than beer. He's not wrong. You sleep in the back near the stores. It smells like vinegar and mold, but it's warmer than the street. In the mornings, you listen to the groaning of wood beams and the slow, thoughtful creak of ships rocking in harbor fog. And always the hunger. Not the screaming kind from before, but a steady gnawing that lives in your gut like a second heartbeat. You ration your portions, eat slowly, let each bite linger on your tongue like it might be the last. You've learned to savor plain. Occasionally you hear good news. A shipment of grain arriving from the south. A patch of potatoes that survived the frost. But it always turns out smaller, sadder, or stolen. You help patch the tavern's roof after another storm. The tar slips between your fingers, and the wind stings your face like it's angry you're even trying. A man comes in one night selling sunlight tincture. Says he brewed it from the first thawed flowers of spring. It's just muddy water in a glass bottle. Still a few people buy it, including you. You sip it later under a candle and pretend it's doing something. It doesn't matter that it's fake. The ritual itself feels like defiance. There's talk that Thomas Jefferson is experimenting with high-altitude farming. That someone in Canada bred a frost-resistant bean. That maybe, just maybe, the weather is starting to shift. But no one quite believes it. Not yet. You're walking back from the docks one afternoon when the wind changes. Just slightly. It's warmer. Not warm, not pleasant, but different, softer. You stop, breathe in. It smells like salt and damp rope, but beneath that earth, real earth, soil that isn't frozen, a hint of green somewhere just out of sight. For a few seconds you forget what month it is. A child nearby shouts, "Mama, I saw a butterfly." It's probably a moth. It doesn't matter. People turn toward the voice like a candle's been lit. You return to the tavern and say nothing. Just sit by the fire and close your eyes, picturing the butterfly, whether it existed or not. Because even in this ash-dark world, something fluttered today. And sometimes that's enough. The road to Geneva is narrower than you expected. Not just the actual path, muddy steep, and as cooperative as a mule with gout, but also the space between civility and chaos. You're not sure when it changed. One day you're walking beside wagons carrying wine livestock, even a piano tied up like a Christmas goose. The next, you pass a man roasting a boot. You've joined a small caravan of travelers. The deal is simple: keep moving, keep warm, share what little you find. Most are headed toward the city hoping for aid or work, or at least stone walls to shield them from the coming frost. You're all trying to outrun the cold, though none of you would say it out loud. That would make it real. At first, there's a strange camaraderie in it, this forced migration. People sing songs to pass the time. A woman named Inga teaches you a card game using stones instead of coins. An old priest blesses the wheels of each cart as they creak forward. You all joke about surviving the worst year in history. It feels absurd. And then it stops being funny. The land turns grim by the mile. Hillsides once green now look bruised. Trees are either skeletal or bloated with wet rot. The rivers run low like they're trying to hide. At one point you pass a pasture where cows lie dead, not from disease but exhaustion. Just stopped walking and didn't start again. People start disappearing. Not in the mysterious ghost story way. No, this is deliberate, quiet, calculated. One night, two brothers argue over whether they should wake a man who's fallen asleep beside the fire. They check his breath. It's there. Barely. They leave him anyway. In the morning, his bedroll is empty. So is his satchel. You learn to count the group each morning. If there are fewer than the night before, you don't ask questions. You just walk. And then you hear the stories. Not told to you necessarily. Just whispered around the fire. Passed between wagons. Nervous glances. Lowered voices. Stories of travelers going missing. Of people trading meat with no animals in sight. Of a soup that tasted wrong. Cannibalism. The word hangs in the air like smoke. No one admits it, not directly. But the signs are there. In one village you pass, the windows of every house are boarded. The doors, too. But not from the inside. From the outside. Someone scrawled a warning in 3 languages on the signpost, "Do not open." They have eaten. You camp farther from the road that night. Historians still debate how widespread cannibalism was during the year without a summer. Records are scarce, but accounts like these, firsthand, hushed, repeated from lips too tired to lie, speak volumes. It's not all horror, not entirely. Because just as you think the road might break you, you come across something unexpected. A villa. High on a hill half hidden by mist. Large, elegant, well-kept. The shutters are open. Lights flicker behind the glass. There's laughter, actual laughter, drifting down the slope. You follow the sound like it's a song. There's a sign at the gate, Villa Diodati. Inside, candlelight glows from every window. The smell of ink and brandy lingers in the air. You linger at the edge of the garden, half expecting to be chased off. But no one notices you. They're too busy arguing about ghosts. Inside are 5 people, young, intense, strange. They're British mostly, and rich. Or at least rich enough to make this misery look fashionable. You recognize one name immediately, Lord Byron. You've heard of him. Everyone has. The mad poet, the scandal magnate. He's pacing in the drawing room, shirt half unbuttoned, ranting about the power of terror. His friend, tall, delicate, strangely serene, is Percy Shelley. You hear him say, "The world is ending, but literature survives." There's also a woman, Mary. 19. Brilliant. Quiet, but sharp. She listens more than she speaks, eyes reflecting every flicker of the fire like they're recording it for later. You'll remember her most of all. They're stuck here too. Weatherbound. Trapped by snow in the middle of summer, just like you. But instead of starving, they write. They've turned their fear into fuel, their boredom into monsters. Tonight, they've decided on a contest who can write the best ghost story. You sit outside the villa long after the candles are snuffed. You don't sleep. You just stare up at the moon, wondering if their monsters are the same as yours. If anyone can write a story worse than the one you're living. You never see them again. But you'll learn years later that Mary writes about a creature stitched together from dead parts animated by lightning. Frankenstein. And the weather, the darkness, the ash, the endless cold was her inspiration. That feels right. You rejoin the caravan the next morning. They joke about you sneaking into a noble's wine cellar. You let them believe it. Geneva rises in the distance like a gray promise. Stone towers, cold gates, smoke from 1,000 hearths. You arrive just as the frost begins to fall again. There's no parade, no celebration, no welcome feast. Just another ration line, another barracks full of strangers. But the walls are strong, the roof holds, and no one's boiling shoes for soup yet. You walk through the city, your breath fogging in front of you, your stomach hollow. You pass a shop window where a cracked mirror leans against a sack of potatoes. For a second, you see yourself, gaunt, pale, but alive. You survived the road. You survived them. And maybe, just maybe, you'll survive the rest of the year. The villa is still in your mind when the snow comes again. Not just a flurry, not that half-hearted summer sleet you've come to loathe, but actual snow. Fat, slow flakes that drift through the August sky like they're trying to apologize. You watch them fall on Geneva's stone streets, on the shoulders of tired workers, on the back of your hand, where it melts into a cold you're almost used to. You'd hoped the city would be different. Inside those walls, past the frost-bitten hills, past the frozen pastures and half-dead villages, you expected something solid, civilized, maybe a bit of kindness or at least warmth. But what you find is a city held together by cold bureaucracy and colder bread. The guards at the gates barely look up as you pass. They've seen too many like you. Everyone's come to Geneva now. Farmers from the French countryside, tradesmen from the north, even a few crumpled aristocrats pretending they weren't once the cause of so much hunger. You're all the same to the city mouths, and Geneva's fresh out of food. You sleep in a shared chamber above a tannery, 12 to a room. Straw pallets, no windows, and a door that barely shuts. The man beside you snores like he's arguing in his sleep. The woman across from you mutters names, probably her family, until dawn. You try to sleep, but it feels like closing your eyes in a coffin. Still, you're not freezing. And these days, that's a victory. Work, if you can call it that, comes in flashes, hauling water barrels, scrubbing soot from stone, unloading sacks of something at the riverside, spoiled grain, you think. But no one asks. The pay, a few crusts of bread hard as stone and probably older than you. You eat them anyway. And then one afternoon, you hear that Byron and the others are still writing. The locals talk about them like gossip passed between ghosts. The brooding one, the poet, pacing through hallways with ink-stained fingers and fire in his voice. The pale one, Shelley, always reading, even as the cold makes his fingertips raw. And her, Mary. You hear she's writing about a monster, a man made from stolen body parts, animated by lightning, feared, hunted, alone. You wonder if she's writing about you. The city is quieter than you expected. Less shouting, more whispers. There's a sense that everyone's running out of things to say. What's left to talk about, really? The weather, the hunger, the next snowstorm that should be a thunderstorm. You take walks when you can, through the alleys by the lake. The cold air slices at your face, but it clears your head. Once you see a boy throwing stones at the ice-covered water, pretending he's breaking through. You ask him why. Maybe if I break the lake, he says, the sky will fall in. It sounds like poetry or madness. These days, there's not much difference. The markets are still open, technically, but the stalls are sad things, empty shelves, spoiled apples, root vegetables that look like shrunken heads. A man sells milk from a barrel that smells like cabbage. You pass by. At a corner stall, a bookseller is burning old volumes to keep warm. Not for sale, just fuel. Shakespeare, Pascal, a stack of pamphlets from a forgotten war. You catch the edge of one before he tosses it into the flames. Treatise on natural philosophy. You consider saving it, but your hands are too cold to argue with fire. Inside one of Geneva's few heated taverns, the talk is turning sour. Less about the weather, more about blame. God's punishment, one man mutters into his beer. No England, another snaps. They're hoarding grain. You're all wrong, says a third. It's the poets. That lot up the hill writing ghosts into the sky. You glance toward the hearth. The flames dance higher as if in reply. It's easier, you think, to blame poets than the sky. Historians still argue whether Byron and Shelley understood the scale of what they were living through. Whether Frankenstein was a product of pure invention or pure reflection. But you know better. You've seen the monster. It's not made of stitched corpses. It doesn't lumber through villages breaking doors. It's hunger. Cold. The quiet violence of a world where nature has forgotten how to be kind. One night, as the wind howls through the city like it's reading a eulogy, you find yourself climbing the hill toward Villa Diodati again. Not to speak, just to look. The house is lit, though dimly. You can see shadows moving past to the windows, gesturing, writing, pacing. You imagine the stories being born inside. Stories that might one day survive this year, even if many of you don't. You turn away. Down the hill, back into the city, you walk until the cold becomes unbearable. You press yourself into a stone alcove beside a shuttered apothecary. Sleep comes in shivers, not dreams. The next morning, snow covers everything again. It doesn't fall in soft silence anymore. It comes like dust, gritty and gray, biting into your skin and sticking in your eyelashes. You see a street performer standing barefoot on a box, painted head to toe in white clay, pretending to be a statue. He hasn't moved in hours. No one pays him. You leave a crust of bread on the box beside him. He doesn't blink. That evening in the tannery attic, someone brings a book. A real one. Not burned. Not stolen. A novel. You don't remember the title. It's in French. But someone reads it aloud, and the room goes still. For 1 hour you forget what year it is. You forget that your teeth hurt, and your socks are wet, and your stomach thinks you've died already. For 1 hour, there are only words. And for a single fleeting moment, the monster Mary is writing doesn't seem so terrifying. Because you realize he wasn't the villain. He was just trying to survive the cold. Like you. The snow has found its rhythm, now falling in lazy spirals that never stop. Geneva is coated in its soft mounds on roofs, icy pearls on balconies, soot-speckled banks on every corner. You can't even remember what the city looked like without it. You've learned to walk differently, to move like someone who expects the ground to shift underfoot, to crunch or crack or swallow. There's no point in complaining. No one else does. Complaints are a luxury like sugar or laughter. Instead, people act, quietly, desperately. One morning, you're jolted awake by the sound of hammers. You shuffle to the window of the tannery attic and peer down to see a cluster of people building something in the square. Not shelter, not gallows, not even a new food line. No, they're erecting a giant pole topped with a broken weather vane and festooned with clumps of dried herbs and twigs tied with red string. It looks like a scarecrow's fever dream. You head downstairs following the smell of hot tallow and burnt wool. The group below is oddly calm. One woman is singing a tune you've never heard. Another rubs chalk on the pole like it's sacred. You ask someone what they're doing. He shrugs. Just trying something new. Turns out they're building a sun pole. A charm, a ritual, a desperate experiment in meteorological persuasion. Light a fire at its base, they say. Chant at the clouds. Pour milk if you have it on the roots. Someone swears it worked in their grandmother's village. You're not convinced, but you help anyway. That same week, you hear of more unconventional remedies. A man straps iron nails into his boots to ground himself against the angry sky. A baker hangs garlic in the four corners of his oven, not to ward off vampires, but to invite back warmth. A widow leaves eggs in her windowsill, believing the shell will call the sun. There's no science behind it, but there is logic. When reason fails, rituals fill the cracks. You meet a boy who claims his family talks to lizards. They know when the sun's coming, he says, clutching a frostbitten gecko wrapped in rags. Papa says if we listen close, they whisper warnings. You lean down. The lizard blinks slowly. You nod and say, "Tell him we're listening." Fringe belief, definitely. But it feels better than just doing nothing. Not everyone's turned to nature. Some lean into science hard. You attend a lecture held in what used to be a ballroom. Now it's a lecture hall lit by whale oil and desperation. The speaker is an old man with a limp and a voice like crumpled parchment. He talks about volcanic aerosols, sunspots, carbon cycles, and ocean currents. You understand maybe half of it, but his passion is infectious. He draws charts on soot-stained parchment waves, his arms, and proclaims, "The earth is correcting herself." Then someone in the crowd throws a rotten turnip. The scientist ducks, wipes the pulp from his coat, and says without missing a beat, or perhaps we're simply in her way. The crowd doesn't riot, which feels like progress. Historians still argue whether people in 1816 truly grasped the global scale of Tambora's eruption, or if they just coped however they could, through science, superstition, or song. But here on the ground, the categories blend. You see a farmer hang a horseshoe above his door and attend weather lectures. A butcher sacrifices a chicken in the morning and reads Newton at night. This year has blurred the line between logic and longing. One particularly bitter morning, you find a group gathered by the lake. They've constructed a raft of reeds and kindling and placed atop it an effigy made of straw, old clothes, and a porcelain mask, written across its chest in ink, "The Cold." They light it on fire. The raft floats out slowly, like it knows where it's going. People cheer. Someone plays a harmonica. It doesn't do anything, of course, but for that hour, people stand a little taller. Later, back at the tannery, you learn someone stole firewood from the city storehouse. No one reports it. You're not sure if it was someone you know. Maybe it was you. Geneva's once orderly systems have frayed into odd compromises. A city official sets up a table in the square and exchanges food stamps for good behavior reports. People forge them. A chemist sells fake sun pills made of powdered lemon rind. A rumor spreads that rats can predict frost. People start following them like prophets. One girl, maybe 12, starts leaving pine cones on doorsteps. When you ask why, she says, "It keeps the frost from learning your name." You sleep with one under your pillow that night. You don't freeze. Coincidence, maybe. The baker you once bartered with dies in his sleep. The line outside his shop doesn't move for 2 days because people don't know he's gone. They just wait. That's how things are now. A small child draws a sun on the tannery wall with charcoal. The next morning, someone adds clouds. The next, lightning. By week's end, the wall has turned into a mural of weather, half dream, half nightmare. You add your own mark, a hand reaching. You never learn if anyone saw it. At night in the attic, people talk more. Someone starts reading aloud again, this time from a pamphlet on botany. You all sit huddled, listening to words like tender seedlings and spring rain like they're spells. Someone says, "What if we're the last generation?" Someone else replies, "Then we should go down telling good stories." You stay quiet, but you agree. Later, you sneak back to the sun pole. It's still standing, slightly crooked now, bits of string fluttering like dried wings. You place your hand on it, half expecting it to be warm. It isn't. But you leave a pebble at its base anyway. A small offering for the cold, for the sun, for whatever gods still listen. And you walk home whispering a thank you to the lizard, just in case. You're barely out of the city when the air shifts. Not just cold now, but something thicker, humid, hot, then cold again, like the sky itself can't decide which season it wants to kill you with. You thought you'd seen the worst of it in Geneva. You thought the riots, the frost-bitten graves, and the ash-colored dawns were the end of the story. But now, heading south through valleys and mountain passes, across rivers swollen with ice and meltwater alike, you realize the cold was only half the disaster. The famine has gone global. They tell you the Alps are closed, snowed in 6 months, too early. So you cut through the lowlands where the path floods underfoot, and the air buzzes with flies. At first it feels promising, less ice, softer ground. The sun even peeks through once or twice, pale and strained, like it's embarrassed to show its face. But it doesn't last. Within days, the frost returns. The winds shift east, and now the rains follow, long and heavy and wrong. You find yourself in a valley outside Milan, where the fields should be thick with late summer wheat. Instead, they lie fallow mud, mildew pools of stagnant water, laced with what looks like oil. You see drowned rats, floating potatoes, dead crows on fence posts. A farmer tells you they tried planting rice, but even the rice drowned. "Too much rain," he mutters. "It's not cold here, just sick." They call it the Southern Famine. Italy, India. China, places that didn't suffer the deep frost, but still find themselves cursed by what Tambora left behind. Monsoons out of sync, crops rotting in flooded paddies, heat followed by sudden chills, livestock dying not from starvation, but from confusion. One farmer in the Po Valley says his cows won't breed, they think it's winter. Further south, the sicknesses spread faster than rumors. Cholera, typhus, malaria where it doesn't belong. You start seeing more priests than doctors, more crosses than medicine. The churches are full again, not with faithful, but with coughing bodies laid in rows across the pews. Historians still argue whether the eruption alone caused these pandemics, or whether they were inevitable, festering beneath the surface of already stressed societies. You shivering beside a clay stove in a broken wine cellar. Don't care about cause. You care about survival. You pass a woman boiling bark in a wine press. She offers you a ladleful. It tastes like dirt and bitterness, but it's hot. That's enough. The road to Venice is clogged with wagons, but they're not traders. They're not merchants. They're refugees. Families dragging carts full of half-spoiled grain chickens, too thin to bother catching, and children bundled in wet linens. Everyone heading south. Always south. As if the equator might somehow forgive the sins of the year. Someone tells you China is starving too. You didn't think the disaster reached that far. But a traveler from Vienna says he heard of a trading junk sailing from Guangdong that docked in Marseille with only 7 men still alive. Their rice fields rotted, he says. Water came early, then fire. You wonder what kind of world this has become, where even the rains come on the wrong schedule. You stay in a town for 2 days, name-forgotten church, crumbling food almost gone. You help bury a cow. Yes, a cow. Not because it died, but because it bloated and split open and the smell was drawing too much attention. You try not to look inside. You fail. On the 3rd day, a boy steals your boots. You're asleep in a barn. He slips them off like a ghost. By the time you wake up and hobble into the street, he's gone. A girl with one eye gives you a new pair of wooden clogs with straw liners. She says she found them in a canal. You don't ask who they belonged to before. At night, the stars return for the first time in weeks. You stare up, wrapped in rags and straw, your breath clouding into the dark. They're bright. Sharper than you've ever seen. Someone beside you whispers, "No clouds tonight, just space." You nod. You wish it felt comforting, but it doesn't. It feels like the earth has been abandoned. One man swears he saw 3 suns in the sky. Sundogs, you'll later hear someone call them a strange atmospheric phenomenon caused by ice crystals refracting light. But to him, it was a sign. 3 suns for 3 deaths, he says, cradling a bundle in his arms. You don't ask who he's holding. In a fishing village near the coast, you witness something stranger. The sea is black, not metaphorically, not as a trick of dusk, but actually black, slick with algae ash oil and some kind of rot that clings to the surface like skin. Fishermen pull up nets full of jellyfish and bones. The mayor boards up the fish market. One fisherman offers to take you out on the boat anyway, says it's better to die on the water than starve on land. You decline. You've learned not to test death's hospitality. Quirky tidbit: in parts of southern India, the skies turned yellow for a month. Not gold, not amber. Yellow like parchment soaked in bile. Crops sprouted and died in the same week. Some regions started worshipping the monsoon itself, pleading with it to behave. Others just left whole villages, packed up and walked west. You hear about them from a merchant still wearing a tattered British East India Company sash who says, "There's nowhere safe anymore. The weather's gone mad." He offers you a piece of salted meat. You eat it before asking what it was. By now, you've forgotten the days of the week. People mark time in different ways: the day of the yellow storm, the night the wheat cried, the week we burned the library. You use your own: the morning of the boot theft, the goat with no eyes, the soup that moved. It's not poetic, it's survival. You reach Naples in early autumn. Except, it doesn't feel like autumn. It feels like nothing. Gray, still. The air is thick, like it's thinking too hard. And there, on a pier, you see something that stops you. A child standing barefoot, holding a tiny umbrella made from reeds and silk. He turns to you, eyes wide, and says, "Do you know if the sky is dead?" You don't have an answer. He shrugs, then walks into the fog. The southern world is crumbling, and yet you keep walking, because the frost might not kill you, but standing still, that will. You don't recognize the sickness at first. It starts as weariness deeper than usual, heavier than hunger. A slow pull behind your eyes, in your limbs, in your joints. You think maybe it's just the miles, the endless trudging, the never-ending chill. You've been tired for months now, but then your skin goes blotchy. Your gums ache. Your mouth tastes of iron even when you haven't eaten in hours. Someone nearby starts coughing, then another, then you. Welcome to the next chapter of the year disease. In a world already weakened by hunger and cold, it doesn't take much. A sneeze here, a grimy hand touching a loaf, water left still too long, and the sickness spreads silent, invisible, merciless. You're in a small port town, maybe in southern France or coastal Liguria. No one seems sure anymore, and the signs have all been torn down for firewood. You're staying in what used to be a schoolhouse, now packed with bodies and blankets and buckets filled with stagnant water. The moaning never really stops. Neither does the smell. The physician, there's only one, walks through each day with a damp cloth over his mouth and a grim look in his eyes. He doesn't ask your name, just checks your pulse, then moves on. Typhus, maybe dysentery, maybe something worse. There's no telling now. You just know it's spreading. You move your bedding closer to the window just to breathe. Historians still argue whether the massive spike in disease during 1816 to 1817 was caused directly by the Tambora eruption or simply made worse by it. Starvation and exposure weaken the body. One bad cough in a crowded room becomes a mass grave by week's end. You see it happen, literally. 3 people die in one night in the schoolhouse. They're dragged out by morning 2 on a door used as a sled, the 3rd in a wool sack. A priest gives a blessing. Someone covers their faces with linen. That's it. The next group comes in before the floor has gone cold. You get out of there the same day. Outside, it's somehow worse. Streets are quieter than before. Not still. Just thinner, as if the world has lost mass. Fewer people, more silence. Even the dogs seem afraid to bark. You walk with a scarf over your mouth now, even when you're alone. Habit, fear, both. In a nearby field, a man's tending to a garden. Actual vegetables, nothing large, nothing ripe, but real. You stop and ask him his secret. Night soil, he says. You blink, as in, he nods. You say thank you and move on. Slowly. One morning you find a group gathered around a well. Someone's fallen in. A child, maybe. It's hard to tell. The body's still there, bobbing near the surface. No one wants to touch the water. No one wants to admit they already drank from it. You spend the next 3 days boiling every drop you consume. If you can find firewood, you meet a girl named Luce who carries a sack of dried herbs. She claims they keep illness away. She burns rosemary in her shoes, dandelion root in her sleeves, wraps sage leaves in cloth and wears it like a necklace. You offer her a crust of bread just to sit nearby. She gives you a handful of mint in return. You chew it for hours, not for the flavor, but because it reminds your body it's still alive. One evening, you hear a man shouting about new stars. You look up. The sky is clear again, and sure enough, it does seem like there are more stars than usual. Maybe it's imagination. Maybe it's ash-cleared air. Either way, it's beautiful. You whisper their names to yourself, Orion, Cassiopeia, the Pleiades. You remember stargazing as a child before all this, back when you thought the world made sense. Then the coughing returns. In the next village, someone's built a quarantine pit, a literal pit lined with straw and blankets, where the sick are left to heal or die. You see 4 people inside. One of them waves. You don't wave back. Another oddity, the rats are thriving. You notice this more and more. Where people die, the rats swarm. But not just scavenging, flourishing. Fatter, faster, more organized. You see them dragging away scraps from an abandoned cart. One of them wears a bit of twine like a sash. You joke darkly that they'll be running the cities soon. Someone nearby hears you and says, "Better them than us." That night you dream of rats with tiny flags and boots. A scholar you meet says the disease is worse in India. The rains came too late, he says. Then too hard. Flooded the streets. People starved. People drowned. Then came the fever. You ask what kind of fever. He shrugs. The kind that ends things. You pass another village abandoned entirely. Pots still on stoves. Doors open. A single cat sits on a windowsill watching the road like a sentry. You don't stop. Quirky fact, some towns in Germany started ringing bells every hour, not for worship, but as a kind of sonic barrier. Keeps the illness from settling, they said. A few towns added drums. One added wind chimes to every door. You wonder if the plague can hear. You tie a string of buttons around your wrist. Luce says it might help. You don't ask how. By now your own cough has come and gone twice. Sometimes it rattles. Sometimes it disappears for days. You never know if it's the start or the end. You keep moving. Because stopping feels like surrender. You eat whatever you can find, boiled greens, stringy meat bark that tastes like tea. Your stomach is past picky. It's just grateful. You come to a monastery high on a hill, one of the few places untouched, it seems. The monks there have a garden, a still, and knowledge. Real medicine. Tinctures, poultices, calendula for wounds, yarrow for fever. They give you a tonic, bitter as grief. You drink it in one gulp. They don't ask for payment. Just a moment of silence in the chapel. You sit there surrounded by candles and stone and the sound of breath. You pray not for miracles, just for one morning without frost. One bowl of soup that tastes like soup. One dream that doesn't end in coughing. When you leave, one of the monks hands you a sprig of thyme. For strength, he says. You tuck it in your pocket next to the string of buttons and Luce's mint. You keep walking, and the sickness follows. But so does the wind, and in it, sometimes, is the faintest whisper of warmth. You make it to London in mid-October, or What you think is mid-October, no one agrees on the date anymore, and the calendar pinned inside the inn you pass has been stuck on Thursday the 5th, 4th, for weeks. It's always Thursday now, or feels like it. London, like everywhere else, has been swallowed by the year, but it suffers differently. The frost is there, yes, cloaking roofs in rime, biting into bone, but the city's size changes how it bears the weight. It's louder, meaner, and somehow more performative in its misery. Carriages still rattle down the cobbles, even if they're empty. Newspapers still print, even if the ink smears in the cold. Street criers still shout about things no one can afford to care about. But the Thames is frozen. Not just a crust, not a sheen of delicate glass. Frozen solid, thick enough for boots, for sleds, for fools with skates and tumblers of brandy. You stand at the edge of the river one fog-heavy morning and watch a woman walk her goat across it. 2 children follow, dragging a sled made from broken shutters. Someone's selling boiled eels from a barrel, steam rising in lazy curls as he mutters, "Fresh, probably." And beside all of it, half hidden behind bundled scarves and smoky breath, are the guards. Armed men in pale coats and dark gloves posted at the bridges and riverbanks. Not to stop you from crossing, but to watch. Always watching. Like they're expecting the river to crack wide open and swallow half the city. A boy throws a rock just to see if it'll break the ice. It doesn't. Instead, the rock bounces. You almost clap. That same afternoon, you find work at the palace. Not in it, mind you, but in one of the kitchens, buried beneath its many wings and chimneys. You're lucky a porter fell ill, and they needed someone with hands and legs and silence. You offered all 3. They feed you, which is more than most places can say. You wash pots, scrub floors, carry sacks of whatever root vegetables haven't frozen through. Sometimes you're allowed a bowl of turnip stew, warm turnip stew. You eat it so slowly, you forget to blink. It's surreal being beneath royalty. Knowing that just a few floors above you are lords, ladies, and possibly even the king himself, drinking heated wine and pretending the world isn't shivering outside their walls. You never see him, but you hear him. One evening, as you're cleaning the edge of a hearth that's bigger than the house you were born in, a tall man in a fine coat passes by. Behind him, a smaller man rushes to keep up, whispering, "Your Majesty, the riots in Bristol." The rest is lost in the crackle of the fire. Because yes, there are riots. Still, Bristol, Manchester, Kent. People hungry, cold, furious. It's one thing when your crops die. It's another when your taxes don't. People aren't starving quietly anymore. Not in cities. Not where crowds gather like storm clouds. You see it in London too. You pass a bakery with shattered windows, the flour inside scattered like snow. A boot print in the middle of the white. No one even tries to clean it. Someone carves the words, "We remember the sun," into a pub door with a knife. No one covers it. Historians still debate whether the royal court truly grasped how bad things were in 1816. Whether they lived in deliberate ignorance or were simply powerless to help. Either way, here in the belly of the kingdom, the contrast is sharp enough to cut your tongue. One afternoon, the kitchen steward opens a crate of oranges. Oranges. You stare at them like they're glowing. The scent alone makes your knees buckle. You're not allowed one, of course. But the peel you sneak from the bin. You chew it behind the coal heap, tears freezing on your cheeks. A boy named Sam works beside you. 12 maybe, teeth missing. He tells jokes that don't make sense, but he's fast with a knife and sings when no one's listening. One night he offers you half a potato wrapped in lard smeared cloth. You try to refuse, but he insists. It's cursed to say no to kindness, he says. You eat it. That night you dream of sunlight, not the golden glowing kind. Just real light. Enough to read by. Enough to grow something in. The cold wakes you before dawn. You cough so hard your ribs hurt. Sam pretends not to hear. Outside the palace, the streets are worse than before. The rats are everywhere, fat, bold, and busy. They climb lampposts. They nest in empty chimneys. Some of them wear ribbon, you swear it. One group of boys sells them as pets. You pass a church where the priest has posted a sign, "No funerals today." All hands needed for soup. Inside, people stir pots so big they look like cauldrons. The soup smells like despair, but you stand in line anyway. The woman ladling it out smiles without using her face. You meet a woman named Martha there. She lost her son in June, she says. Froze to death beside their goat. She keeps his gloves in her pocket like a charm. Better days coming, she whispers, stirring her soup. You nod, even though you don't believe her. Quirky tidbit, some Londoners begin wearing multiple pocket watches, not for fashion, but because time feels off. Sunlight comes late, disappears early. Bells ring wrong. People say the clocks are lying. One man claims his watch ticks backward every Thursday. You check yours. It's stopped altogether. There are rumors, of course, that the king will flee, that France will invade, that the frost will never lift, that a second volcano is brewing beneath the Atlantic. You believe all of it, and none of it. Your world is a kitchen hearth, a bowl of stew, a cough in the dark, and Sam's half potato. But one day, as you pass through the corridor on your way to dump coal, you see it. A window newly cleaned, and through it, a sliver of sky. Not gray, not ash, but blue, faint, distant, but real. You stop walking. You stare. Sam bumps into you, grumbling. You don't move, because for the first time in months, you see a color that doesn't hurt. The clockmaker speaks with such certainty, you almost believe him. He's older than frost by the look of him, and wrapped in layers of wool that hang like curtains on a forgotten stage. His shop is barely more than a shed on the edge of London's market quarter, squeezed between a cobbler's storefront and a stall that used to sell pears. The pears are gone. The cobbler's out of leather, but the clockmaker. He's thriving. Time's off, he tells you the moment you walk in. Doesn't ask your name. Doesn't offer a chair. Just says it. Time is off, and so the earth misbehaves. You don't know what you came in for. Maybe shelter, maybe warmth. But you stay. There's something compelling about a man who talks like he's been listening to the gears of the planet itself. All around the tiny room, clocks tick. Big ones, small ones, tower clocks stripped to their skeletons, pocket watches with cracked glass faces, cuckoos frozen in mid-crow. Some tick fast, some tick slow. One spins backward. None of them agree. He points to one in the corner, elegant gold-edged and absolutely still. That's the sun's time, he says. Been sleeping since April. You nod, because it somehow makes as much sense as anything else. The man says he used to build chronometers for ships sent them with explorers across the sea. Time mattered more out there, he says, when a degree off could mean drowning. Then he smiles like it's a joke you're supposed to laugh at. You don't. You ask what he thinks is really happening. He leans in close and whispers, "Apocalypse." But not biblical, mechanical. He explains the Earth is a gear in a great celestial machine. One of its teeth has chipped. The moon's running fast. The sun's running late. Seasons miss their appointments, he says. The frost isn't early, it's wrong. Historians still argue about fringe apocalyptic theories that bloomed in 1816, some secular, some spiritual, all a little cracked at the edges. There were pamphlets on planetary misalignment, magnetic disruption, even lunar eclipses as omens. But none were quite like the clockmaker's mechanical prophecy. He points to a chalkboard cluttered with numbers. Eclipses out of sequence. Tides snarled. No sunrise on May 6th. Not a real one. Just smoke and guesswork. You look at him. You think we're broken, he doesn't blink. I think we're between ticks. You leave with a pocket watch he gives you for free. It doesn't work. But you wind it anyway. Later that week, you meet the sect of the final hour. You're not sure how it happens exactly. One moment you're walking down a street near the Thames looking for firewood, and the next you're handed a candle and told to follow. The people are quiet, dressed in black. Most wear broken clocks around their necks, stopped at different times. You hold your breath and follow into an old meeting hall once used for poetry, now draped in velvet and soot. At the front is a woman, pale thin, with hair like iron filings. She calls herself Sister Meridian. She speaks of the last rotation, of how time has been spinning slower and slower, and soon the earth will come to its final halt. Not in a bang, she says, in a long pause. The cold is just the shadow before the stop. She lights the candles one by one. She invites everyone to place their broken clocks on the altar. Dozens clatter down. You don't join them. Not yet. But you watch. And in their faces, you see something that looks suspiciously like peace. Later in the back, someone offers you a pamphlet titled Chrono Salvation, Preparing for the Stillness. You tuck it into your coat. You're not sure why. You don't believe any of it. But the logic of it, the neatness, is tempting. Because if time itself is breaking, it explains everything. Why the crops won't grow. Why the sun rises late. Why the moon is too bright or too large. Or why people keep waking up at the wrong hour without knowing why. Even your own dreams feel out of order. One night you dream of an orchard full of clocks hanging from trees. When the wind blows, the fruit chimes. When you reach for one, it turns to frost in your hand. You wake to snow inside the attic. You can't even be surprised anymore. In the kitchens, Sam has grown quiet. He works as fast as ever, but the singing is gone. You ask him why. Sister Meridian said noise feeds the frost. You want to argue, but you don't. Not after seeing the look in his eyes. Instead, you give him your pocket watch. To remind you it's still ticking, you say. He smiles faintly. It isn't, though. You pass the clockmaker's shop again a few days later. It's closed. A sign on the door reads simply, Winding Down. You stand there for a long time listening to nothing. And then you walk back to the palace, to the kitchen, to the fire, to the bowls of soup, to the stories you tell yourself so you don't disappear. Someone asks you what time it is. You look at the sky, then at the stopped watch in your pocket. Then you shrug. There's no time left. And for the first time in weeks, everyone nods. You never thought you'd wear fur in July, but here you are pulling on a coat made from patched-together fox pelts half rotted at the seams, smelling vaguely of smoke and wet dog. It's too big in the shoulders, too tight at the elbows, and it creaks when you move, but it's warm. Or warmish. And that's all that matters now. In Paris, everything has taken on a strange theatrical tone. This is a city that refuses to die quietly. You arrived days ago, trudging past the once grand gates of a capital that's equal parts frostbitten and fabulous. The streets are caked in ice, but there are still cafes with chairs outside, empty of course, but defiantly arranged as if customers might come any minute. Music still drifts through the alleys, sometimes from bowed violins, sometimes just a man whistling alone in the dark. And the fashion, unbelievable. In a year where most of Europe is wrapping its feet in rags and chewing on tree bark, Parisians are wearing cloaks of swan feathers, hats lined with velvet, and charcoal boots lined with newspaper and gloves that go up past the elbow with no fingers at all. One woman strolls down Rue Saint-Antoine wearing a dress stitched from flour sacks and a necklace made of broken glass. They've stopped pretending it's summer. They've started dressing like characters in an opera about the end of the world. You blend in best you can. A fur-lined coat, 2 scarves, mittens that used to be socks, and boots filled with wool and straw. You feel like a walking scarecrow, but at least you don't freeze. Parisians have always loved spectacle. Now even suffering has a costume. At first you scoff, then you understand. If you're going to starve, why not do it in style? That first night you find shelter in an abandoned theater. The seats have been ripped out for firewood, but the stage remains coated in a dusting of snow. You fall asleep backstage beside the crumbling remains of a prop guillotine. A fitting cradle for this year. By now, fashion is survival. Gloves aren't just accessories, they're armor. People sew coins into the cuffs for weight, line their sleeves with cabbage leaves, dip their boots in wax to keep out the slush. Some smear oil on their clothes to trap body heat. You meet a man named Jules who wears 3 cravats and claims it stimulates circulation. He also claims he invented frost-resistant trousers, but you watch him fall into a puddle and cry for 20 minutes. Even the aristocrats, what few remain, have adapted. You pass a lady stepping out of a carriage draped in furs so thick she looks like a bear emerging from hibernation. Her bonnet has icicles on it. Her breath curls like smoke. She smiles at you with blue lips and says, "A charming afternoon, no." You nod and cough. Paris is starving like everywhere else, but the city hides it under rouge and ribbons. Bakeries display empty baskets. Restaurants post menus filled with lies, carottes en neige, which turns out to be grated turnip with salt. You order bouillon de l'aube one night and receive a bowl of hot water with a piece of string in it. You eat it anyway. Quirky tidbit. There's a rumor that someone in Montmartre is breeding rats for their fur. Not for food, for fashion. Rat muffs, they call them. You see one on a woman's wrist. It's gray, soft, still vaguely twitching. You look away. On the Seine, a market floats literally. Wooden platforms built on the ice stalls rigged between boats frozen in place. Vendors sell anything they can find: wilted herbs, stained playing cards, powdered bones, spoons bent into jewelry. One man offers sundust in a tiny vial. You ask what it is. He says cigarette ash and sulfur. You buy it anyway. You sleep in a bakery one night, curled beside the cold brick oven. The baker's gone. The walls are covered in flowery handprints. You dream of sugar, just sugar. Then you wake coughing again, always the coughing. Historians note that while Paris did not see the same level of rural famine, its people suffered in different ways: overcrowded tenements collapsing, infrastructure violence in the streets, hidden behind a performance of poise. The city didn't starve. First, it unraveled slowly, thread by thread. You start hearing about the underground suppers. Supposedly, they're hosted in abandoned catacombs, lit by candelabras, stolen from churches, serving food smuggled in from somewhere. Only the rich, the reckless, or the connected attend. No one knows what they're really eating. You try to find one. You fail. But you do find a hidden library behind a collapsed bookstore. Inside warmth, faint gaslight, and a handful of others like you. They pass around torn pages, dog-eared books, whispers of old poems. You read aloud one night something about warmth, though you don't remember the words now. Everyone listens like it's a fire. Someone hands you a coat stitched from curtains. You need velvet, they say, for morale. You wear it proudly, even if it smells like mildew. One afternoon, snow falls again, but this time it's black, soft and papery like the ashes of a burned novel. A child nearby laughs, says it looks like confetti. You celebrate, dance in it. Why not everyone else does? A violinist appears in the street, then a flutist, then someone with a triangle. By dusk, there's a full band playing under a street lamp while people waltz in the soot. You don't know the steps, but no one does. It's a shivering, glorious mess. A man sings in Italian. A woman throws flower petals from a window, real ones. People gasp. It's the best hour of the year. You walk home soaked, sore, half-frozen, and smiling. Because even now, the human spirit refuses to wear gray. The next day, someone sets fire to a government storehouse. They don't find the culprit, but the flames rage for hours, licking up into the cold clouds, painting the sky a color you haven't seen in months, orange. People gather around arms, out basking. No one stops them. Someone shouts to the sun and throws their hat into the fire. You throw in your tattered scarf. For 10 minutes, you're warm. You meet a tailor who makes clothes only for the dead now. They deserve to look sharp, he says. Final impressions and all that. He offers to make you a coat, just in case. You decline. Not yet. One night you catch your reflection in the glass of a broken perfume shop. Your cheeks are hollow. Your hair is straw. But your eyes are sharp. Your coat is velvet. You look ridiculous. You look alive. And maybe that's the point. Because in the Arctic, that's come to Paris style is no longer fashion, it's rebellion. The lecture begins with shouting. Not the good kind, the heated academic kind, where old men wag their fingers and young students lean forward eager to pick a side. No, this shouting is more personal, cold, like people are arguing not for knowledge, but for answers, survival. You're sitting in the back row of a cramped hall at the Collège de France where smoke clings to the beams and frost etches the corners of the windows like delicate handwriting. The room is packed beyond reason, farmers with cracked hands, chemists with ink-stained cuffs, a few hungry-eyed soldiers, and you with your patched coat and a note passed from a friend. He's going to explain the weather. The speaker is a gaunt man with a booming voice and eyes that look like they haven't blinked in 3 days. His chalk screeches against the board as he draws a jagged line across a map of the world. He slams the chalk down and points, "This is the pattern. And this is why you're starving. You're hooked." The lecture veers wildly between disciplines: volcanology, solar theory, atmospheric science, divine wrath. He charts ocean currents and sulfur levels, speaks of sunspots and magnetic fields, even draws diagrams of Earth's axial tilt. He references Tambora finally, someone saying the name, and paints the sky in invisible ash. He calls it a chain of calamities. A single volcanic eruption, he says, disrupted wind patterns across the planet. Sulfates rose into the stratosphere, reflecting sunlight. Less sun, cooler temperatures. More rain, crop failure, mass hunger. And now he slaps the chalkboard again, disease. Someone stands up in the middle of the room. But what caused the eruption? The speaker freezes. There's a pause. The kind of pause that swells with meaning. Then quietly, he says God, or geology. Choose your comfort. The room murmurs. You feel it building, the tension. The question beneath the questions. The ache behind every complaint. Why is this happening? Who is to blame? Historians still argue whether the lectures of 1816 provided real understanding or simply gave frightened people new words to hold on to. What's clear is that knowledge in this moment feels both powerful and pointless, because knowing how something happened doesn't mean you can stop it. A man in the front row stands up next. What about the sun? He shouts. They say it's sick, that it's dimming. You've heard the rumors, that sunspots are spreading, that the sun is no longer healthy, that a solar minimum, a kind of celestial sleep, is responsible for the cold. The Dalton minimum, they call it. A natural lull, a quiet sun and a quieter world. The lecturer rubs his temple. It's possible, he admits. But even if it is, we can't fix the sun. That sets it off. Someone in the crowd hurls a glove at the podium. A woman screams that her child starved because the doctors said spring was coming. A man demands to know why Europe should freeze when America is drowning. Someone else claims they saw 3 suns in the sky last week. Omens, they cry. The heavens are warning us, fists slam into wood. A scuffle breaks out near the aisle. You press yourself against the wall, clutching your velvet coat like armor. And then from the very back, a voice cuts through. No one knows anything. Silence. Everyone turns. It's a boy. Barely 16. Pale. Dirty. One eye swollen shut. He looks around and repeats himself. No one knows anything. You're all just guessing. No one answers. The lecturer gathers his papers and quietly leaves. You stay behind as the crowd disperses, the room crackling with leftover arguments. Someone's broken a chair. A few linger in huddles, whispering about sun cycles and sulfur. You step up to the chalkboard and run your fingers through the drawn ash cloud. It smudges easily, like the truth. Later in the street, you pass a man selling pamphlets. Repent and the sun will return. You ask him who wrote it. I did, he says. After the frost took my wife. You buy one, not because you believe it, but because you understand it. You find a quiet corner in the Latin Quarter and read. It's not elegant, not logical, just pure grief inked onto paper. He claims the earth has tilted its face away from the divine, that we're being punished for pride, for excess, for forgetting the old rituals. The gods of the sun have turned their backs. You fold the pamphlet into your coat. You're collecting theories now. One woman in the garment district says the cold is a punishment for Napoleon, that France's sins were never atoned for. If we'd executed him earlier, she says we'd still have peaches. A grocer claims it's a plague in the clouds, alive like a sickness. The sky has caught a fever, he says. That's why it sweats ice and weeps fire. A drunkard tells you it's the moon. She's jealous, he whispers before falling asleep in the gutter. Even your own thoughts start bending. You see signs in everything, the way smoke curls the shape of puddles, the number of crows on a wire. You watch the frost form letters on the window one morning. It almost spells your name. Quirky fact, in some towns, people start writing letters to the sun. Actual letters. folded paper sealed with wax. They leave them in fields, tack them to trees, float them down rivers, pleading, bargaining. Please return. We miss you. We forgive you. You write one yourself, not because you think it will help, but because you need to remember how to ask. Days later, you pass the lecture hall again. A new speaker is there, this one gentler, more measured. She speaks of long cycles, ancient ice ages, the earth breathing in and out over centuries. Maybe she says this is just a shiver. You listen for a while, and then you leave. Because whether it's a shiver, a punishment, or a mechanical failure of time itself, you're still cold, still hungry, still hoping, still walking, and still waiting for anyone to stop arguing and bring back the sun. You find the potato by accident. It's buried under a collapsed shed at the edge of a frost-bitten village, half frozen, almost gray, barely bigger than your fist. You'd been digging for firewood in the rubble when your fingers struck something soft instead of splintered wood. You dig it out, trembling, certain it's a rock or a lump of spoiled meat. But no, it's a potato. You cradle it in your hands like it's a treasure, which in this year it is. Around you, the land lies pale and broken. The trees are bare. The sky is sickly. The fields, once golden, once green, are now brown, cracked and dusted in a rime that never quite melts. But this single stunted tuber feels like a message, like the earth hasn't given up entirely. Back in town, you share the news. At first, no one believes you. Then they ask if it's edible. Then someone offers to trade you a wool blanket for it. Then someone else offers 2 boots. You refuse both. You don't want to eat it. You want to plant it. You find an old wooden box and line it with crumbling pages from a ruined Bible. You bury the potato in a mix of wet ash and soil you chip out of the frozen ground behind the tannery. It's stupid, really. It's too late in the season, too cold, too much hope for too little starch. But still, you pat the soil and whisper, "Grow." Someone nearby laughs, but someone else crosses themselves. This is how potatoes become sacred. Historians record a sharp spike in potato worship during and after the year without a summer. Not religious worship necessarily, but something close: reverence, ritual, superstition. The potato becomes more than food, it becomes resistance. A symbol of survival. A final kindness from a planet that's forgotten to be kind. In some places, families carry small potatoes in their pockets like charms. In others, people draw them in chalk above doorways. You hear of a woman who named her only potato St. Ambrose and sang to it every night. You don't mock her. You're singing too. Meanwhile, the rats thrive. You see them everywhere now, plump, confident, clever. You swear one of them saluted you the other day. They move in groups like organized scavengers. Some have nests lined with paper money. Some drag buttons and bones into neat piles like currency. There's a joke going around. When the world ends, there'll be rats and potatoes left. And the rats will be trading the potatoes. No one laughs the first time they hear it. Everyone laughs the second. Your potato doesn't sprout. Not right away. You water it with melted snow. You angle it toward the rare morning sun. You even sing to it quiet lullabies from a life you barely remember. Others start planting too. Small things usually. Scraps. Seeds saved from spoiled carrots. Old roots that look more mold than vegetable. But still, they plant. The town begins to shift. Not by much, not overnight. But people are starting to act like spring might return even if it arrives wearing winter's boots. A young man turns the alley behind the apothecary into a garden bed. A widow places a shard of broken mirror above her planters, hoping it will reflect more light. Someone in the East Quarter starts building cold frames from broken windows. The earth is still bitter, still tight, still reluctant. But something is stirring. You meet an old woman who insists on blessing every seed she plants with soot from her fireplace. Ash wakes the roots, she says. They like the memory of fire. You believe her. Why not? At this point, science and magic are drinking from the same bowl. One morning, your potato sprouts, just a hint of green, barely a flicker, but real. You don't shout, you don't dance, you just look at it for a long time, like it's a child taking its first breath. Then you go find Sam and show him. He stares, then he whispers, "We're going to live." You don't say anything. You don't want to scare the words away. Quirky tidbit: in parts of rural Ireland, people buried family heirlooms next to their potato plants, believing it would bless the crop. You meet a farmer who placed a silver comb in his seed bed. "Came from my grandmother," he says. "Now it's hers and the potatoes." He offers you a handful of boiled peelings. You accept. They taste like hope. In Paris, a new craze begins: potato theater. People carve faces into sprouted potatoes, paint them, and perform miniature plays. It starts as satire mocking politicians, the church, the cold. But then it becomes something else, something earnest, an attempt to retell their own story. You see one play acted out in a ruined cafe. A potato named Madame Soleil saves her village by growing despite the snow. The audience cries, so do you. Back in your garden box, the sprout becomes a stem, thin, shaky, but it holds. People come by to see it. A girl leaves a button. A man kneels and says a prayer. Someone makes a tiny sign, "Sun Worshipper in Residence." One evening you hear singing in the alley, half a dozen voices. They're not singing to you. They're singing to the dirt. Because maybe, just maybe, the world has started to remember how to grow again. It's still cold, still hungry, still strange. But there are fewer fights in the breadline. More candles in windows. Someone builds a greenhouse out of old picture frames. Someone else starts giving lectures on compost. Your dreams begin to change. Less frost, more green. You still cough. You still wrap your hands in cloth before touching metal. You still wear 4 layers and keep a pine cone in your pocket for good luck. But when you walk down the street now, you smell something new. Earth. Not rot, not smoke. Soil. And for the first time all year, it doesn't smell like death. It smells like something waiting. The snow returns without warning. Not dramatic snow, not the thick, angry flurries of spring's betrayal, but a slow, eerie hush. One moment you're listening to the creak of thawing roofs and the squelch of boots in softening mud. The next flakes are falling again, quiet, indifferent, inevitable. You tilt your head back and let one land on your tongue. It tastes like nothing, like air if it had forgotten how to be warm. Still, it doesn't stay long. The sun, a pale imitation of its old self, pushes weakly through the clouds, and the snow vanishes into mist before it can even settle. The children, if there are any left in your part of town, laugh anyway. They pretend it's a celebration, because it is December now. And somehow, you've made it. You, the one who boiled pine bark into tea, who wrapped their feet in paper, who traded a button for broth, cried over a single radish, and whispered to a potato like it was sacred. You survived the year without a summer. The ash is still in the air, so faint now that only the sunrise knows it's there. Each morning the sky glows with a strange orange-pink hue, as if the world is trying to blush away the past 12 months. No one trusts it, least of all you. Geneva, Paris, London, Milan. They're quieter now. Not empty, just quieter. Like cities waking from a nightmare, unsure whether they're actually awake. The street musicians have returned, though they mostly hum instead of sing. Firewood sells for less. So does silence. A boy offers to shine your boots for a crust of bread. You let him. He hums something cheerful. You don't recognize the tune. Somewhere nearby, bells ring. Not the urgent clang of warning or prayer, but a slow, steady peal. Someone has declared the year over. Not officially. Not with parades or pronouncements. Just a simple sign on a market wall: the dark year has passed. You touch the paper. It's soft, freshly made. That alone feels like a miracle. The fields outside town are still wounded. There are bald patches, sour soil puddles that don't dry. But here and there you see life. A patch of weeds, a row of carrot tops. Someone's trying beans. Someone else has built a crude windmill with scraps and a dream. The potato you planted. It grew. Not big, not pretty, but enough for 3 bites. You shared it with Sam and a woman who hadn't spoken in months. You still remember the way they chewed in silence, eyes closed. No one cried. It was too sacred for tears. You hear stories again, this time not of doom, but of survival. In Switzerland, a family that lived off nothing but nettles and goat milk. In northern Spain, a village that kept its cows alive by feeding them boiled leather. In Prussia, a man who walked 800 kilometers to trade a violin for seed grain and made it back. You write their names in the margins of your old pamphlets. You've started collecting people now instead of theories. One night, you're invited to a real meal. Not a charity broth, not a boiled root in a bowl of melted snow, but a proper supper. Candles, a table, 5 chairs. You wear your best coat, still velvet, still absurd, and tie your sleeves with twine. The host is a former tailor who lost everything except his ability to cook. He serves turnip stew with bits of salted pork, actual pork. You chew slowly. You want it to last forever. Someone proposes a toast. No one has wine, so they use warm water with mint. To the year without a summer, someone says. And someone else replies, may she never come back. Laughter. Real laughter. It hurts your ribs. It feels good. Historians later debate when the world truly recovered. Some say it was 1817 when the skies cleared and crops returned. Others say the scars never healed. But none of them were there in this moment watching soot-stained faces laugh over mint water and pork. You think this might be the real recovery, the return of joy. Quirky tidbit people start naming babies Sunny. It's meant to be ironic, but also maybe not. In one village, a baker renames his shop Tomorrow's Bread. In another, they hang garlic above their doors, not for demons now, but for tradition. Some things are hard to let go. You keep the pine cone in your pocket, just in case. The last snow of the year falls just before New Year's Eve. Not a storm, just a dusting. Gentle, almost polite. You sit outside as it lands on your sleeves. You don't shiver. Your body has forgotten how. Children run by, throwing it in the air. Someone lights a lantern. A woman sings a lullaby you last heard in spring, when your hands still cracked every morning, and death walked the alleys like a friend. Now the air smells faintly of soil, of things warming, of things beginning again. You whisper a prayer not to any god, but to time itself. Don't stop again, you say. And somewhere in the sky, far above the ash and cloud and starlight, the earth ticks forward. You wake up to silence, not the dead hollow kind that haunted most of 1816, where every breeze felt like a warning, and even the trees forgot to whisper. This silence is gentler, full, not empty. The kind of hush that comes when the world is holding its breath just before something new begins. You lie still for a long time, curled under layers of patched cloth and wool that doesn't match. Your breath curls in the air, not from cold, though there's still a bite, but from habit. Your body hasn't quite caught on yet. The stove hasn't burned all night, and you didn't wake up freezing. You step outside, blinking into a world that no longer looks gray. The sky is washed in faded gold, like the light has remembered how to be soft again. Snow clings in thin patches to rooftops, but the streets are mostly clear. Beneath your boots, the ground feels damp, not frozen. Your lungs don't sting when you inhale. You walk to the market square. You don't expect much, maybe a few desperate stalls, but instead you see something else entirely. Color. Bundles of greens, real greens, sitting in crates, slightly wilted, but unmistakably fresh. Turnip tops, sorrel, even a few pale radishes. Someone is selling candles shaped like suns. A child is handing out drawings of flowers, each one traced in crayon with colors you haven't seen in a year. You buy one for a crumb of bread and tuck it into your coat. It smells like wax and paper. It smells like life. You, the survivor of 1816, do not feel triumphant. Not exactly. It's not the kind of survival that ends in applause or monuments. No banners, no parades, just the slow, strange realization that you are still here, that your feet still walk, that your body, in all its hollow exhaustion, has carried you this far. You survived the darkest year in human memory, and now you must decide what to do with that. Others are asking the same question. You pass people planting small beds behind cracked buildings. You hear someone playing a flute with only 3 notes. A woman sings while hanging linens, her voice ragged but defiant. A boy skips stones into the river and whoops with joy when one bounces 3 times. Even the rats seem less frantic. In your pocket you carry your pine cone, a button, the watch that never ticked, a seed. You haven't planted it yet. You're not sure where to put it, but it feels right to keep it close. You find Sam again. He's taller now, lean, still grinning like a fox. "I heard birds today," he says. You don't believe him until hours later you hear it too, a single chirp from a window ledge. You freeze. He grins wider. You both laugh. You laugh until your sides hurt. Across Europe, the snow finally lifts. Slowly. Unevenly. As if the clouds themselves are peeling away like old bandages. The sun doesn't blaze back all at once. It creeps, peaks, sometimes vanishes again. But it comes, and with it crops begin to grow again. Trade resumes. Letters arrive from towns you thought were gone. Roads reopen. The rivers lose their ice. You hear a violin played outdoors for the first time in months. Not well, but beautifully. They'll call it the year without a summer. They'll write it down in history books. A volcanic winter, an agricultural collapse, an anomaly. Some will blame Tambora, others sunspots. Some will still say it was punishment from God. Historians will debate it for centuries. but you will remember it. You'll remember the ash in your bread, the soot on your teeth, the frost on your pillow, and the names of people who didn't wake up. You'll remember the snow in June, the flames in the river, the child who asked if the sky had died. You'll remember the pole you built for the sun, the soup that moved, the rat with a sash, the prayers whispered into potatoes, the firelight dances, the mint leaves, the little notes you wrote to the sun and left on windowsills like offerings. You'll remember how people became quieter but kinder, how hunger made strangers family, how even in the worst cold, someone always lit a candle. You survived 1816, not through strength alone, but through stubbornness, through fire, through stories, and maybe, just maybe, through that tiny flickering ember that refused to go out hope. The snow still falls now and then, but it's not the same, not like it was. Now it drapes itself softly across the land, like a tired blanket rather than a threat. The flakes melt more quickly. The ground accepts them. The sky is gentler. The air, while still cold, is no longer cruel. You walk through the quiet streets, hands tucked into your patched coat, and you feel the warmth of things returning, of time resuming, of the world shifting back into rhythm. Your feet remember how to walk without slipping. Your skin remembers sunlight. Your ears catch music not imagined, not distant, but real, played by someone 2 doors down. Off-key, yes, but played with joy. You lean back against a wall warmed faintly by the afternoon light and let yourself breathe. Not the shallow, frantic breathing of survival, but the long, deep kind you forgot was possible. Around you, life continues, quietly, bravely. You see someone sweeping a doorstep, a pot of herbs sitting in a windowsill, a scarf drying in the breeze. And above you, the sky is blue. Not a perfect blue, not yet. But it's enough. So close your eyes now. Let the year drift away like breath into mist. Let the frost recede from your bones. You made it through the darkest days. And the light, however pale, however late, is finally here. Sleep well, survivor. You've earned it. End of script. Sweet dreams.